Our inaugural lecture is how to achieve emotional wellness through cognitive behavioral therapy. In the last, I think the COVID-19 is one of the pandemic actually brought mental health to the fore. It made us realize the importance of social interaction and how much we are social beings. You know, I remember the year 2020. It's the year I wouldn't forget in a hurry. When it became obvious that, first of all, you have to go with the whole mask thing, wash your hands, a lot of things set in like paranoia, okay? It was especially very difficult for me because one of my favorite things is actually hanging out. And all of a sudden, I was locked in a room, and the only time I could still even come to hospital yet. It was difficult for me. And for the first time, I experienced how important social interactions are and how much they affect your emotional wellness. I didn't think that, the things you take for granted. You don't know how important it is to be walking around without a mask until you're mandated to wear a mask. And then you realize that, wow, breathing is not easy. Even me, that is an embryologist, I wear masks all the time, but certain hours of the day. And now someone is asking me, you've got to wear this, you wear this, wear this. When you wear mask, you wash your hand. Then you wash your hand, somebody is touching me. And I had my nephew at home, paranoia setting. I said, I cannot come and give this boy COVID now. Me that went out to hospital, I came back, this, that. At some point, I felt like I just lost it. I remember one day I came to work and Dr. Sheyi looked at me and said, are you okay? I said, yes, I'm okay. He said, Adiswa, you don't look okay. I want you to know that COVID is dealing with all of us. So I understand that you don't look okay. And then one day, I sat down and I cried. And my sister asked me, why are you crying? I said, I just want somebody to ask me, please, can I get your passport and boarding pass, please? I really needed to just go away, but I couldn't. It was then I realized how important our mental health is. Today, we're going to be hearing about how to achieve emotional wellness through cognitive behavioral therapy. And this God-loving mother of three who believes in making a difference in the lives of people around her was born in the quaint little town of Ebutemeta in Lagos mainland in the late 70s. She is the third of 5 children of her parents. Her father is a retired diplomat and a retired Assistant Controller General of Customs, while her mother is an entrepreneur. She had always known that she wanted to serve humanity as a doctor right from her early days. This burning desire saw her through primary school in Sacred Heart Primary School, Bodija, Ibadan, and also through her elementary and middle schools in St. John's International School, Waterloo, in Belgium, where her father was posted at that time. When her family returned to Nigeria, the remainder of her secondary school education was at the prestigious Federal Government College of Okigwe, Imo State, a unity school and one of the best schools in the country at that time. She was the school's head girl and represented the school in several essay writing competitions held across the state. She won a state award on one of such competitions, which saw her name appear in the dailies. On completing her secondary school, she gained admission into Nigeria's first indigenous university, the widely acclaimed University of Nigeria, Nsukka, to study her dream course, medicine. She recalls with fondness and gratitude to God how her hands trembled when she was told to write her name in the school's book of life, the register for incoming first-year students, the day before matriculation. After 8 years, instead of 6, in the University of Nigeria, due to incessant ASU strikes, she served her beloved country in the NYSC program at the Bayelsa Oil Palm Clinic, Yenagoa, Bayelsa State. During this time, while enjoying the hospitality of the people of Bayelsa State, she married her university sweetheart, Mr. Godwin Anireto. They settled in Lagos, where she completed her 1-year housemanship at the Nigerian Air Force Hospital, 445 Ikeja, Lagos. Her postgraduate training journey started in 2008 at the elitist Eco Hospital at Ikeja, Lagos. After 1 year at Eco Hospital, she relocated to Abuja to join her husband, who had gotten a job there. She started her postgraduate training afresh at the National Hospital, Abuja, in 2010. She was the only resident in the entire northern part of the country, 19 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at that time, to have passed the Part 1 examination for the Faculty of Family Medicine, West African College of Physicians in 2013. She also passed the Part 1 exam of the National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria in the same year. She completed postgraduate training in family medicine in 2017 and became a fellow of the West African College of Physicians. She thereafter applied for a diploma in the notable Academy of Cognitive Therapy, Pennsylvania, USA. She also received training at the Beck Institute, an internationally recognized training center for cognitive behavioral therapy, founded by the father of cognitive therapy himself, Professor Aaron Beck of blessed memory. She was recognized as an international diploma and certificate cognitive therapy in 2020. She is presently the medical director of the Sunshine Family Medicine and Psychotherapy Clinic, DIFF Medical Center, and she's still in the business of spreading sunshine to everyone around her. She's beautiful, she's God-fearing, mother to 3 lovely children. She's loving, she's alluring, she's stunning, and her name is Dr. Chika Anireto. A round of applause, please.
Wow, thank you so much. What an introduction. Glory to God. Congratulations to the entire DMC family. What an honor to be standing here before you all. I'm so proud to be part of something as great as this. When someone was reading one of the memos, I had to glean some wisdom. You know, when they were sharing the secrets of success, I was coding the secrets. As some of us are coming up in our entrepreneurial life. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm here to talk about something so dear to my heart, and that is cognitive behavioral therapy and how it can help our lives, especially in the area of emotional wellness. Oh, audiovisual. Help me share the slides. Okay, thank you. Got it. Okay. How to achieve emotional wellness in intimate relationship. So why am I talking about this today? Why am I talking about emotional wellness? I think a lot of us have heard about mental wellness, but emotional wellness? Well, mental wellness, emotional wellness, they're all intimately intertwined. The point of this presentation is to create awareness. The reason for this presentation is because there's been a reduction in mental health across the globe, especially since 2019, since the pandemic that Adeswa mentioned. Mental health has been barraged by a lot of problems, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression all over the world. According to a large global survey that was carried out in 34 countries, Nigeria included, we found out that there is a general decline in mental health all across the globe. So what is mental health? It's a combination of psychological well-being, that's your mind, your emotions, and your social well-being. That's how you interact with one another. There are too many unsatisfying relationships all over the world. People are married, but believe you me, they wish they weren't. As a therapist, I see a lot of people. Not too long ago, I saw a woman, a mother of 3, and she said to me, before she was married, she went through a very tumultuous childhood, lost her parents at a young age, lost her siblings. As she spoke to me, they had just 2 surviving members of her family, her and her elder sister, who was a sickler. So when she got married, she thought to herself, now I can be happy. But lo and behold, she sat in front of me heartbroken. A marriage of 6 years was about to hit the rocks. So the point of this presentation is to tell us about the what, the why, and how of fulfilling relationships. So the objective, I hope at the end of the day, we all would have learned a little bit about what I mean, what emotional wellness is, and how we can, apply it to our relationships. To learn some skills that we can practice to improve emotional wellness in this context. So why intimate relationships? Because these are the ones that affect us more than any other relationships. We have acquaintances, we have friends, but at the end of the day, your partner, your spouse, is the one who sees you when you're good, when you're down, is the one who will stand beside you, the one who sees the tears when other people see the smiles, the one who knows you inside out. They could either make you or they could mar you. That's the point of this presentation. So I'll be using this outline. The first part of it would be to introduce the term emotional wellness, to tell us what it means, tell us about how important it is in our relationships. Why are we talking about relationships? What could go wrong? How does it go wrong? How do we achieve emotional wellness? That's the point, and that's how I'll do the lecture today. So by way of introduction, we all know how important relationships are. DMC is a family, and I'm so glad to be part of this family. The family, we all know, is the bedrock of society. And the relationship between a husband and wife is the nucleus of this family. The families play roles that we all know about. Families have the responsibility of educating their members, instilling values, providing material and non-material care to their members, teaching life skills, socializing, launching their members into the community. So if a family is dysfunctional, the society is also dysfunctional. Emotional wellness in intimate relationships, as you can see, translates into emotional wellness in the society at large. So what we're talking about here is how to help our families' relationship, and then this translates to how to help our society. So now you're probably all wondering, what is this emotional wellness? It is not being happy all the time. It is not having 100% positive emotions. It's a part of mental health, like I said. To have an optimal mental health, you have to be emotionally, that's in your feelings, psychologically in your mind, and socially in how you interact with people, healthy. So emotional wellness is knowing your state of emotional well-being, knowing the emotions you have, identifying them, being aware of them, understanding them, accepting them, your feelings, and then being able to manage effectively through challenges and change. So emotional wellness, you can be upset and not be emotionally unwell. As long as the general complete balance, the balance between the positive and the negative emotions is more in favor with the positive, you are emotionally well. The key words there are being aware, knowing you have these emotions, accepting. You'd be amazed how many people reject negative emotions. They don't feel that they should have negative emotions. Unfortunately, that's like a prelude to having mental, emotional unwellness. Understanding. A lot of people I see at the clinic, they don't know why they're sad. They are sitting down and suddenly overcome by this cloud of sadness. They don't understand where their feelings come from. They don't even want those feelings. They don't understand. They are not even aware. So when you're in that kind of internal battle, you find out that it will be difficult for you to manage effectively any challenge that you might be facing, or even be able to adapt to them. So being emotionally well is to be able to be aware of your feelings, whatever they are, understand where they're coming from, accept them. So if you're upset, you're angry, you know why, you know that this is what upsets me, this is what stresses me, this is what I need to do to de-stress. And at this time, I need to have some space. I need to be able to recoup, to be able to give back to the society, or give back in whatever place you find yourself. And in that way, you'll be able to manage effectively through challenges and change. So this is what I mean by emotional wellness. So basically, having all this, an understanding of your emotional health, feelings you have, accepting it, understanding it, you will now be able to be balanced inside and then be able to adapt to change and difficult times. So contrary to what we may think when you hear the term emotional wellness does not mean I'm happy. In that case, I don't know if any Nigerian will be emotionally well if that's the case. It's being able to know where your feelings come from, accept them, understand them, be aware of them, and be able to manage with them because you have been able to balance yourself out internally. So you can begin to imagine and understand how intimate relationships play a key role in this emotional wellness. Someone could be emotionally well until they get home. Like my patients would tell me, "Doctor, this is my husband, it's all his fault. Everything I'm going through, it's his fault." Of course, it's not true, but in their minds, they think that way, and vice versa. So there are some little subtle signs of emotional wellness, things you can check, and identify in yourself and be able to say, am I really emotionally well? Number one, signs of emotional wellness, being able to be aware of and able to express your emotional concerns with other people. You'll be amazed how many people go through stuff and have no one to talk to, no one they feel they can confide in. A patient of mine, I was seeing her husband, he was brought to me, domestic violence. She called him out to his employers. Employers sent him a letter, get help or you're out. So I saw him and he said, "Doctor, see my wife as well." And I saw her, and within a few minutes she said to me in tears, "Thank you so much for just listening." And we were just doing evaluation. We hadn't even started the work of therapy. So being able to be aware of your feelings and even having someone too that you trust to be able to confide these emotional concerns with or to is a sign of emotional wellness. Feeling content most of the time. So you see, being content most of the time doesn't mean you will not have ups and downs, doesn't mean you're not emotionally well. Feeling you have a strong support network. So the emphasis here is on your perception. The thought that you have, the belief you have that, you know what, my husband is behind me, you know what, my wife is behind me, I have people who support me, you have my back. Whether in reality they do or not is another topic altogether. But if you believe it, then you have that emotional wellness. Being able to be yourself most of the time. A lot of people want to be like other people. They feel like they're not living up to who they really are. They're looking for approval in all they do. They're not emotionally well. And finally, feeling generally good about who you are. So these are signs, telltale signs that you're emotionally well. So if you're emotionally well, you'd be aware of your sensations, your emotions. You would know what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. You would have come to accept your emotions and not fighting with yourself over them. You would come to know that, oh, I'm upset, I've been heartbroken, this person did me wrong, but you know what? It's okay, I'll be fine. Versus, why am I still feeling this way? I should have gotten over this by now. So you can understand emotionally well versus unwell. Allow yourself to experience these emotions. That's accepting them. A lot of people don't believe that emotional upset or being sad is allowed. They just feel like, I should be happy all the time. And you know what? That's the beginning of emotional problems. When you feel like, why am I not happy? Everyone is happy. People who have this trait, who have the feeling that they should always be happy, they are looking for happiness. They are not accepting of little ups and downs of life and small frustrations. Unfortunately, these are the people who tend to abuse substances because they feel like I should always be happy. I should always be okay. These things should not get me down. So they are not willing to accept negative emotions. And unfortunately, paradoxically, they now become emotionally unwell. Needing help and being able to ask for it. Some people believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness. It's a sign that I'm not altogether there. So I'm going to struggle it out, whether I can do it or not. So that means you're really not emotionally well. If you are emotionally well, you know you need help and you wouldn't be ashamed to ask for it because it's actually wisdom to know when you need help, not weakness. Seeing stress as something you can learn from or something that is a threat. So what I'm saying, these things I'm listing out, they are telltale signs that you are emotionally well or unwell. So if you see stress as a threat, you wake up in the morning and rather than, have the attitude, oh wow, I'm going to work today, I'm going to, work towards God's purpose for my life, I'm going to do work on my job and change lives and at least, make a difference, you have the attitude of, oh no, here we go again. How will I cope? Will I be able to meet up? Will they like my lecture? Things like that, then there's a problem. There's actually an objective scale to be able to measure this emotional wellness objectively. It's called the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale. So it has, questions that help us to assess our mental well-being and emotional well-being. So what about mental wellness in all this? Where does this fall in? So like I said, emotional well-being is a component of mental health. Mental health encompasses emotional well-being, psychological well-being, and social well-being. So, definition of mental health. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So I'm going to go through that again. An individual who is mentally well or optimally has optimal mental wellness is able to realize his or her own ability, is able to cope with the normal stresses of life because he has a balance in themselves, accepting the situations where they're in, having a good concept of self, and then being able to reach out into the society. No wonder one of the criteria for any mental illness in the DSM or ICD-10 is when you are not able to cope with the ordinary stresses of life. One of the criteria in every mental health disorder, they must meet that criteria of, is the person able to function? If the person cannot function normally in their life, then that disorder might be there. But if you're sad and you're able to go to work, not only you're just going like bodily, but you're able to engage, you're able to really carry out the work that you're meant to do, not just as routine, but engage truly, then you might be going through an up or down, you might be having ups or downs, but definitely not mental wellness. So like I said, we all have to achieve a balance between this mental health and physical health. All too often we put so much emphasis, especially men I've come to realize, on the physical, and we throw away the mental, the emotional, the psychological. But what I'm trying to pass across to you today is that there has to be a balance, and they are equally important. Your mental health, which includes emotional health, psychological health, social health, is as important as your physical health. Again, the importance of emotional wellness is that it affects our behavior. You want to do well at work, you want to do well at school. If your emotions are in disarray, sooner or later it will tell in how you behave. You see a patient or a friend, and he's easily angered, easily frustrated, easily annoyed, losing his temper, there's a problem. At work, the quality of your work is slipping. You're not as efficient or productive as you used to be. You're making mistakes. There's a problem emotionally. At home, you yell at your wife unnecessarily. You snap at your children. You blame people that when you know really the problem is not from them. You transfer aggression. In your social interactions, you're not nice to be around. Even spiritually, your spiritual life is suffering. All because of how you feel, what is going on. That is how important, that's the power of emotional health, emotional wellness. So, coupling it with relationships. To have an emotionally healthy relationship, you have to have emotional wellness. So wholesome, intimate relationships increase emotional wellness, and vice versa. So emotionally well people have wholesome relationships, and the opposite is also the case. If you're emotionally unwell, it's a matter of time before your relationship will also be in trouble as well. The importance of wellness in relationships is that wholesome, intimate relationships that are well, that have emotional wellness, where the partners are emotionally well, they do protect against depression. They protect against low self-esteem. They even reduce the risk of mortality among adults with coronary artery disease. They reduce the development and progression of cardiovascular disease. What does emotional health have to do with physical health, you may ask? Well, hundreds of studies have attested to the fact that social support, just that thought that you have someone or people who love you, who care for you, who listen to you, improve your mental and physical health. How do they do this? When you are psychologically stressed, your body releases hormones that antagonize glucose. That is, they prevent the body from using glucose as it should. So you have increased glucose levels, you have increased stress hormones, the catecholamines, the adrenaline, These are the ones that increase blood pressure. These are the ones that increase blood sugar, break down glycogen, sugar is released. These are the ones that even increase cholesterol level. So in the short term, this is good. It helps you overcome the stress. But imagine when you're saddled with a chronic psychological stress, chronic, marital dysfunction, chronic, emotional unwellness, then those same hormones will wreak havoc on your body. So psychosocial stress is actually a big risk factor for coronary artery disease. A risk factor, not an actual cause, true. But imagine if you have other risk factors. You have a family history of diabetes. Your father has diabetes. You are also overweight. Your doctor says your cholesterol level is, skewed. It's not right. Then you now add the psychosocial stress, So this could be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. And then someone can now actually have a physical condition. Something as real as a myocardial infarction, something as real as coronary artery disease. That is how important emotional health is, especially in our relationships. So people who are chronically stressed have reduced immune systems. No wonder they have regular or frequent minor ailments. Today is malaria, tomorrow is a cold, next day is diarrhea. Patients keep coming back and forth in your clinic. You need to check their emotional well-being. Increased risk of hypertension and heart disease, like I explained earlier. I've quoted my references here in case you want to do further study. Bottom line is, emotions and relationships matter. They are not to be pushed aside and relegated to the background. Let me do my work. Let me do the important things. Let me take care of my physical health. Let me jog. It's amazing to me how many people feel like you can get immunity from a pill. Doctor, there should be something you can give me to boost my immunity. Surely there's a pill, surely. And then they are disappointed when I tell them, yes, but it's not just this pill. You see, it's a combination of things. You see, you need to eat well, you need to sleep well, you need to drink well, water, rehydrate yourself. You need to have wholesome relationships. You need to eat vegetables and fruits. You need to exercise well. And they're like, really? Wow. Especially during the COVID era, when COVID was still in high force. A lot of people were taking vitamin C and zinc, all in a bid to get immunity optimal. But unfortunately, the truth is this: our bodies are more than body. We are emotion, we are will. That's why I was talking about, enthusiasm in our souls, fire in our spirits. It's true. We are not just body, that you can go to the gym and you'll be surprised that you fell sick a week later. We're also emotions, we're also will, we're spirit, we're soul. And the thing, sometimes that glue that holds it together is your relationship. So, relationships matter. What do intimate relationships provide? How come we tend to pair up? Why are human beings social in nature? It's because of emotional needs. So to be emotionally well, you need to have your emotional needs met. What are emotional needs? They are like multivitamins, antioxidants to the physical body. Those things that you need to be optimally healthy. So across an overview of what our major emotional needs are companionship, intimacy, support, love, friendship, acceptance, support. These are the things that relationships provide, intimate relationships. And these are the things that we lack, that leads us, if we lack them continuously, that lead us into emotional unwellness. So a lot of things could go wrong in our relationships. Clash of core beliefs. What is a core belief? A core belief is the general way you see yourself, and you see other people, and you see the world. It's your general understanding, your conclusion about life. A core belief could be something like, if it's positive, no matter what, I'm able to cope. Another person's negative core belief could be something like, I'm vulnerable, I'm weak, I'm needy, I'm not good enough, I'm less than enough. I need someone to depend upon, I need someone to take care of me. There's some people that actually have these beliefs about themselves. And about other people, beliefs like, people are dangerous, people will hurt me. The world is dangerous, the world is unpredictable. So these beliefs are like the sunshades that these people wear. They color their view of the world around them. So if I think that I'm not good enough, I'm going to be very hardworking to be able to meet up. I'm going to read 5 hours if what I need to read is 2 hours. I'm going to prepare and over-prepare just because I feel they will see that I'm not good enough. I might not even ask for help, because if I do, you would see that I'm not good enough. So these core beliefs, they shape your your behavior, they shape what you do, they shape how you cope with things that happen to you. So I'm talking about a clash of core beliefs. So when two people with different core beliefs get married or are about to get married, there could be a clash. The one example that comes to mind is a couple that I saw not too long ago, a few months ago. And the husband was one who grew up, had to work hard to make a living. So his core belief was, I need to save. Saving is planning for my future. And then his wife came from a background where, in her own words, they were dirt poor. So her conclusion about all these things was, if you love me, you'd give me money. Money equals love, because people who spent money in that environment of penury were those who loved people. I'll give you money. It's a sign that you love me. So imagine these two people. One is with the core belief of saving is good for the future. The other one, give me money to show me you love me. And then being unaware of their core beliefs, because these are subconscious desires and subconscious beliefs. So there was a clash. And where she was trying to get him to show her love by giving her money, he felt she was a spendthrift and was trying to save the money because, what do you mean? Save money for the future of our children, for our future. So when two people come together in marriage with different core beliefs, that's almost like, a recipe for a problem. Unmet expectations. So people like the patient I told you about earlier who thought that marrying would be the beginning of happiness after so much pain growing up, then unfortunately she was in a marriage that wasn't what she expected. Unrealistic expectations. Some people believe that my wife should be like my mother. Then unfortunately your wife doesn't turn out to be like your mother, and then there's a problem. Differing communication styles. Sometimes people disagree, not because they're arguing, not because they disagree in context of what they're saying, but how it is said. Those of you that are married, I don't know if you've heard this so many times, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. Don't talk to me like that, don't shout at me, don't use that tone of voice. So communication styles. There's some men who by nature have loud voices. Some men by nature are aggressive in the way they talk. And it's just because of the way men grew up in society. When men were boys and grew up in groups of boys, for boys there's a hierarchy. There's really the top dog, and then there's the ones that fall in line under the leader. So in a boy's world, you have to be aggressive, you have to be the top dog, you have to be the man to be respected. And then this same top dog now marries. And women, on the other hand, talk to engage, to get closer, to share their selves, their secrets. So you have a top dog man and a woman who wants to talk, to engage. You see that the man will be talking the way he's used to talking with his peers and his friends. And to the woman, she's like, "Oh, stop shouting at me. Don't talk to me like that." And it's like, "Well, I'm not shouting at you. I'm just telling you." And you're like, "No, you're shouting. No." And then the argument derails. So it's not really that they're arguing about the content. It's just the communication style. Other things that could go wrong, infidelity. Infidelity could be a coping mechanism for some people. We talked earlier about, how emotional unwellness can affect immunity. So some people, in a bid to maintain this emotional wellness, go into other relationships because they sense that something is missing in their own relationships. And then, of course, it makes things worse. Undiagnosed personality disorders. There are quite a few people, it's more common than we think, personality disorders. A personality disorder is where someone's personality, because of how they grew up, is not right, not balanced. So some people grow up being taught or learning that approval from other people is what defines them. So for instance, you're in a family where we're all high achievers in this family. We all get A's. We all go to Blue Ivy or top league universities. So your son comes back home with 8 over 10. And you're like, okay. But I'm sure the person that got 10 over 10 didn't have 2 heads. What you've just said to that child is that excellence gets my approval. Go and get 10 over 10 and I'll clap for you. So what you've said without saying it is that if you want my approval, you want my applause, go and get good grades. So what the core belief this child grows up to have is that academic excellence and approval of other people is what makes me a worthwhile person. And that is the making of a narcissist. So unknowingly, parents inadvertently raise people with some kind of core belief problems, negative core beliefs. So imagine someone in that kind of family who is a high achiever, who derives their sense of self from somebody's approval, versus someone else in another family who may have like a dependent personality disorder. For instance, imagine the scenario, you're the last born, you know. No, don't pick that. You call the nanny, get that for them. No, don't do that. They can help you. Just read your books, get good grades. No, don't. Are you in the kitchen? Don't. Are you not supposed to be studying for exam? Go and read your books. In other words, what you're telling that person, what the child might come out learning is that I need other people to take care of me. Unwittingly, parents, we teach our children and help them to form unhelpful core beliefs. So we're talking about things that could go wrong in relationships. So I'm just explaining how these core beliefs come about. So two people, one person needing the approval of somebody else, another person needing to be taken care of. So you see, one person is needing approval, the other person is, one person is needing to be needed, needing approval, the other person is needy. So the relationship is a codependent one, not an interdependent one. A relationship is meant to be interdependent. I get my needs met from you and from other people. But when it's codependent, without you, I am nothing as a person. And if anything happens to that relationship, these are people who can commit suicide. And you're like, why would you kill yourself? Because in the death of that relationship, the person is lost. Because they've lost themselves just because of the codependency based on an undiagnosed personality disorder. So I was talking about undiagnosed personality disorders and codependency. Another thing that could go wrong in relationships is not speaking or understanding your partner's love language. So we all know about the love languages, touch, gifts, spending time. So if you are speaking one love language and your spouse is speaking another love language, the problem that could occur is not because you don't love them, but they don't feel loved. You're not communicating that love. And unfortunately, what we tend to do is we communicate the language we speak. So my love language might be, I like gifts. And your love language might be, prioritize me, spend time with me. So for your birthday, I'll buy you a gift, because that is what I would want. And for my birthday, you would spend time with me. And I'm like, hello, where's the gift? So we need in relationships to speak one another's love language. Okay, so I talked about core beliefs earlier. I've been talking about the things that go wrong in a relationship before I begin to talk about how to achieve wellness. So all this is a build-up to the aim, the point of the presentation, which is how to achieve this wellness I've been talking about. So it goes wrong because we start from having negative beliefs, believing we are one way, other people are this way, the world is this way, and the beliefs we have, like I said, taint our perspective of everything else. So they give rise to our attitudes, which is our intermediate beliefs, our rules, our assumptions. An assumption could be like, if I bend over backwards to please him, he will love me. Some people have this kind of belief, and then you see them. The man slaps them, and they're like, he's my husband, he's a man, he's showing he loves me. He doesn't provide, and they're like, he's going through a rough time. And you're like, what do you need to see before you know that this marriage is dysfunctional? It's because they're acting based on their own intermediate beliefs. If I bend over backwards, if I do everything he wants, he will love me. But unfortunately, it's their perspective, it's not reality. So these beliefs affect behavior, and this is why people do what they do. So after the intermediate beliefs, it trickles down to thoughts, automatic thoughts. What are automatic thoughts? These are the things that pop into our minds in response to a situation. So you could be out, or you could have a date with your spouse, and he's meant to come from work and meet you in a rendezvous that you guys had planned earlier. And then 2 hours later, you're still alone. So if you had the thought in your mind that, how dare he stand me up? What? The emotion you would have is anger. Or if you had the thought, oh my goodness, this is not like him, what could have happened? The emotion would be one of empathy, one of concern. So you see, what brings about our reactions, our emotions, is the thoughts we have. Thoughts are the things that bring about emotion. So this is important because when we're talking about emotional wellness, we're going to be looking at the thoughts and how to see whether the thoughts we have as a result of our intermediate or core beliefs, whether they're actually realistic or whether we're wearing glasses that are shaded by the things we concluded from how we grew up. So what I've been talking about, how emotions cause behavior and emotions come from thoughts, not particularly the situation themselves, is what is called the cognitive model. This is the premise upon which the whole cognitive behavioral therapy is built. Remember, this lecture is titled How to Achieve Emotional Wellness Through Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. So I keep using cognitive concepts to try and explain these things. So emotions come from thoughts, not necessarily situations. Two people could be in the same situation and have different thoughts, and as a result have completely different emotions and completely different behaviors. Two people in a difficult marriage. One person has the thought, if I do all I can, it's a woman's job to adapt to her man. And what I'm telling you are thoughts I've heard people say to me. I'm not just making them up. That's why they come to me so easily, because I've heard people say this to me. You know, it's a woman's job to adapt to her man. And so if he beats me, I adapt. And the marriage, it's a woman's job to maintain peace by adapting and being resilient. That's someone's thought. And then another person has the thought of, I will not, no matter what it is, I will never sacrifice my mental well-being for anybody. And this is a patient's thought as well. So imagine two patients like this in the same situation. So the one that has the idea of a woman is meant to adapt and bend over backwards because she's the one to make peace. The emotion would be one of understanding. She'll be able to take everything, and her behavior would be to maybe placate and apologize even when she's not at fault. But the patient who told me that nothing will make me sacrifice my mental well-being for anybody. I love my husband, but I will not. Her husband shouted at her, and he had to apologize. Same situation, not even the same, maybe just a little bit of the situation that the first person experienced. But you see that the emotion was different because of the idea she had, the thought she had. And if we keep tracing it back, it will take us back to her intermediate beliefs and her core beliefs. And if we keep tracing back to how she grew up and the conclusions she arrived at as a result of the things she experienced. So I'm talking about why people have the feelings they have, why they behave the way they behave. And the reason is that the core beliefs they have as a result of the conclusions they drew because of what happened to them is what is making them see life the way they see it. So, having laid this foundation, let me introduce the cognitive distortions. We're talking about emotional wellness in intimate relationships. So, cognitive distortions are categories of negative automatic thoughts. If you remember what I said an automatic thought was, that is those thoughts that come to your mind when you're faced with a particular situation. So there's a broad category of them. So many thoughts can come to our mind. They actually have categories of them. And this is what I'm talking about. So the categories of these negative automatic thoughts, otherwise known as cognitive distortions, that is distortion of the way you think. The thinking pattern that is not realistic. That is what is bad about it. It's not bad because it's bad, but it's just not realistic. Like the one I said about a woman is meant to bend over backwards to maintain peace. I mean, that's not realistic, is it? Okay, so selective abstraction is an example of a cognitive distortion. It's also known as a mental filter. So these are quite common. It means looking at one small negative detail and ignoring mountains of positive emotion. So if we give an example with relationships. So your spouse forgets your birthday and you are so upset. And why you're so upset is because you have the idea, the thought that he forgot my birthday, that means he doesn't love me. And that is an example of selective abstraction, where you use one small detail to draw a conclusion and ignore every other thing he did. He pays your bills. He gives you money even though you earn a salary. He bought you an expensive diamond necklace 2 weeks ago, but it doesn't matter. Forgot the birthday, he doesn't love me. That is an example of selective abstraction. He didn't call, so he doesn't care, and vice versa. Attribution. Attribution is when you assume your partner has a negative or bad motive. So this is an example of a cognitive distortion. It's a type of negative automatic thought, and these are the things that affect intimate relationships. So the man comes home late. In fact, I can even give you an example from an actual patient. The woman is an entrepreneur. She owns a business, a thriving one at that. So after a rough day at work, her phone died. So she couldn't contact her husband. She couldn't tell him where she was. The man is fuming. He can't reach her. She's not anywhere to be found. And in his mind, she's with another man. No doubt about it, she's with another man. That is an attribution, assuming negative motive. She has not even come. Then she comes home. In her mind, I'm coming home to my loving husband who will welcome me home with open arms, and she meets someone who is fuming, who is angry. So that is an example of attribution. You've not heard anything, nothing at all, but you automatically give a negative motive. Negative versus positive sentiment override. Have you ever met any couple or a man or a woman who is married you've never heard them say anything bad about their wife? I think the CMD might be one of these. He's always saying, my jewel of inestimable worth. That is an example of positive sentiment override, where you see all good. It's not that she's perfect. No one is. We are thriving by the grace of God. But in his eyes, she is ticking all the boxes. So there are relationships like that. And then on the other side, on the opposite side, there is a negative sentiment override, where the woman buys you a gift, buys you a wristwatch, and you're like, she has spent all the money I gave her. So these are cognitive distortions. These are things that make you see things the way you see them. And why do you have them in the first place? It goes all the way back to intermediate beliefs, to core beliefs. So you see how these things affect relationships. So we're here to talk about how we can help one another, help our relationships using tips from cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's so many other cognitive distortions. I'm just going to mention the common ones. Standards, unrealistic standards. A man that I marry must be tall, dark, handsome, and rich. Because, I've watched maybe Keeping Up with the Kardashians and all whatnot, and in my mind, if you're going to get married, this is it. So when the man is tall, he's dark and handsome, but he's not rich, it just won't do. It's a standard and it's unrealistic. Emotional reasoning. I don't know who shows this more, the men or the women. I've seen it on both sides, men and women. You believe something for no reason other than you feel it to be true. For instance, someone sends you a text message. Maybe your husband sends you a text message, and you reply, "Oh, I love you, honey," and he doesn't reply. And you're like, he doesn't love me. He doesn't know how to say it. That's why he didn't reply. I know it. He doesn't love me. And the man replies maybe in the evening of that day, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was swamped with work, I love you too." And you're angry already, too late. So no reason he gives will be able to fit the bill, because emotionally you believe it to be real. You've already believed it without any rational reason you can pinpoint, no evidence, but just that it feels real. He didn't reply that "I love you," which you said with all your heart, so he doesn't mean it. It's not true. That's emotional reasoning. Overgeneralization, when you use one thing to cover everything else. So your wife is a stay-at-home mom, and you are the breadwinner. You come back home, and she usually has a warm meal ready for you at the table. But today, the house is in disarray, and there's no warm meal. And then you look at the sink, plates everywhere. Look at the living room, toys everywhere. Children, they've not even had their bath. They're not ready for bed. And the woman comes out, and you look at her, and she's like, "Oh, honey, welcome." You're like, "Welcome yourself. Why is this place like this? You are such a lazy woman." So you have used one example to generalize. She has become lazy because of one example. That's overgeneralization. So these are the things, the way we see these things, and the thoughts we have, the attitudes we have, that affect our relationships, because they affect our behavior. So this is not an exhaustive list. Finally, the road to emotional wellness. So what are we going to do? I've listed the things that could go wrong. I've talked about how they go wrong. I've talked about the effects. I said how it affects immunity, how it affects your work, how it affects your behavior. What are we going to do about it? So to achieve emotional wellness, well-being, you need to have all these things. Just thought to list them out. But number one, even though you're in a relationship, it is not 100% your spouse's responsibility to take care of your emotional needs. Even though you're married, because there is an innate drive to meet those needs, it's not 100% their job. When you think it is, that's where there's a problem. So number one way is to increase your own self-awareness, your own sense of self. Take care of yourself. Like I say, I like to say this, it takes a whole person, two whole people, to make a whole relationship, not a half and a half. So in marriage is 1 + 1 = 1, not half plus half equals 1. Half plus half will cause a disaster. You have to be whole in yourself to be able to have a whole relationship. So look at yourself. Look at how you take care of your body. A lot of women don't like the way they look. They don't like their shape. They don't like their weight. So do something about it. Don't depend on your husband. He didn't compliment me. He looked at me a certain way. If you don't like it, then do something about it. Eat well. Take care of yourself. Have a good positive body image. Ensure a work-life balance. Realize that in order to have this emotional wellness, you need to be able to achieve balance in your work, in your career, and in your emotional life, in your own personal life. Bottom line, you need to have a time for yourself. I call it me time, where you do whatever makes you happy. If what makes you happy is being with your spouse, so be it. If what makes you happy is lounging in a bathtub, taking time, thinking about your day, doing these things will help you to be aware of your emotions, aware of what you're feeling. Even think to understand where they came from. And remember, that is the emotional wellness we're talking about. Self-compassion, give yourself a break. A lot of us have what is called, not me, what is called, there's a term in CBT called double standard. But it doesn't mean the double standard the way we think, like when you say one thing and do another. Double standard in cognitive terms means when you give other people a break, but you hold yourself accountable. It's okay for someone else to do this, but for me, no. Your standard for yourself is higher. You have such a high standard for other people, but you can have compassion on other people. But when you make a mistake, it's almost like, you can't forgive yourself. So have self-compassion and forgive yourself. Then number 2 is address your thinking errors. You know those cognitive distortions I mentioned? This is how to address it. So these are a list of questions to ask yourself. When you find yourself, you're able to identify, or your spouse identifies, or you see a therapist and they identify some unrealistic thoughts you have, unrealistic assumptions, like the woman I told you that said I have to bend over backwards to maintain peace in my home. That was what she lived by. But when I said that to her, she said, that doesn't sound right. I said, you're right, it doesn't sound right. But I'm like, but that's what you've been doing, don't you think? She said, yes, absolutely. So sometimes just being able to say those things to yourself and realize that this is how I see things, this is actually how this is how I react emotionally without any reasoning, without any actual evidence. It helps you to see how negatively skewed your thoughts are, and then you can help to make them realistic. So making them realistic is where these questions come in. So I'll give you an example. So for instance, the example I gave about, he didn't reply my I love you, so he doesn't love me. So you'd ask yourself, what's the evidence that he doesn't love me? He didn't reply my text message on time. That's one. What else? Did he say that he loves you? Yeah, he said so. Does he take care of you? Does he speak to you nicely? Yes. Does he hurt you physically? Does he abuse you? No. And then we're writing these things out. In session. So we have a paper. We're listing out all the evidence in favor and all the evidence against. And at the end of the day, we realize that there's like 10 reasons in favor of he does love you, even though he didn't reply your text message on time. And there's maybe like 2 or 3 of he doesn't love me because he didn't reply it on time. And at the end of the day, I ask patients and I say, if it was, I have them use an example of someone they care about, not themselves, because of the double standard I told you about earlier, because it's easier for you to be compassionate towards somebody else than to yourself. So I say, if it's your mother, or maybe your best friend that came to you and said to you, my husband doesn't love me. And you said, why? And they listed all these things out. And you said, is there any other evidence? And they listed the other ones. What would you say to them? And it's amazing because it's easy for them to now see that, no, he must have been busy. Replying text message has nothing to do with love. They suddenly becomes so clear to them. Of course he loves you. That he doesn't reply on time doesn't mean anything. Maybe he sent it and the message didn't deliver. All of a sudden it becomes very clear when they have stepped out of their own shoe and put themselves in another person's shoe. So these questions are questions you can ask yourself when you find yourself acting based on these assumptions, based on these automatic thoughts, and it helps to make your thinking more realistic. Another way is to actually learn each other's love language and don't assume that your spouse speaks your love language. So I'll add something to this. During the courtship, or even if you're already married and you've been married for many years, it's worthwhile to find out what your spouse's emotional needs are. What are those things that, make your husband or your wife feel satisfied emotionally? You might know yours, so this is worth having a conversation over and actually taking time to meet those needs. When you meet those needs, you'll find out it's so easy to please this person. All of a sudden, it's not like, people say women are just complicated. And I have patients, sometimes they forget that I'm a woman myself, and they say, doctor, women. And I'm like, yeah, those people, right? Women, So when you find the emotional need of your spouse, it's almost like finding the key to their heart. And it's so simple all of a sudden. Their behaviors begin to make sense to you. So all of a sudden you realize that this person doesn't care about the money I give her. She wants my time. So when you come back from home, you're tired, you spend 30 minutes and she feels like the queen of the house. That's all. And then if you don't even remember her birthday, she's forgiving. But if you didn't know that, you spend how much money and how much time on her birthday, and then you come back home tired and you don't even say, how are you, how was your day, why are you looking like this? And she's angry and like, this woman, I can never satisfy her because you don't understand her needs. The reason she married you is because she was hoping to have those needs met. So the key is know those needs and you'd have her heart or his heart in the palm of your hand. Interdependence versus codependency. I talked a bit about that earlier. A lot of marriages, more than it should be, are actually codependent and not interdependent. A codependent relationship is one where one person is a giver, gives, because they feel that in giving and getting your approval, they meet their own needs. But that is just one of those negative core beliefs. So they give everything. Have you ever seen someone who has lost themselves in a relationship? They don't know what they like. They don't know what they really want to be. All they know is how to please this person. And unfortunately, as core beliefs go, people who are that way tend to attract people who need that approval, but they take it for granted. Look at the expression on the man's face. He doesn't care that much. So that is a codependent relationship. Unfortunately, if you find yourself in that kind of relationship where you've lost yourself, where your spouse's approval means more than your sense of self, then actually what would help to unravel this is actually therapy, to help you to understand why you do this. Because a lot of times people who do that, they can't tell you why. They just see themselves, they don't care if their needs are not met, so far this person's needs are met, and vice versa. But that makes for a toxic relationship, and the person stays there despite all odds. And you've heard of some people who died in their relationships because of things like this. How do we achieve emotional wellness? So I've talked about, addressing automatic thoughts. I've talked about meeting one another's emotional needs. I'm talking now about increasing rewards. Relationships are a balance of rewards and punishment. In anything, if the punishment is more than the reward, you would be looking for a way out. But if your rewards are more than your punishment, this is what brings about the positive sentiment override I spoke about earlier. So what I mean by meeting or increasing rewards is, in a situation where there is a disagreement, you could either, keep digging in and insisting on your right and holding on. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, and, increasing the divide between the two of you. Or you can just say, you know what, we can never agree on this. So this is what I believe and this is what you believe. But you know what, it's okay. we will agree to disagree. And then you increase your rewards. You do things together that make each other happy, that meet each other's emotional needs. And when you do this consistently, meeting your needs, what will happen is positive sentiment override. Even when you make a mistake, she'll excuse it, she'll give an excuse. Oh, he forgot that our lunch date. He's busy. He's busy. He's a busy man. My husband is a busy man. You know, he works hard to take care of our family. Even when she puts too much salt in the soup. This is my wife. She was so busy thinking about the children, she must have put salt. It's okay, it's all right. So these are the things you can do to increase these helpful things that help to build up emotional wellness in relationship. And then decrease punishment. This also decreases the negative sentiment override, where you choose love instead of, disagreement, instead of being right. You choose to keep the relationship together. The unity of the relationship matters more than your being right. Second, the third point is being vulnerable versus defensive. Being defensive is when you bring up a wall. When somebody is saying in the middle of an argument, what keeps an argument going is this fact that at a point, couples are not listening to one another anymore. They are busy thinking of what to use to attack the other. So you are missing the needs that are not being met in your spouse. So if you change or try to change your focus, not on, preparing your attack, but on she's hurting. Even if what she's doing is wrong, the way she is now, I don't like it. Or he is now, I don't like it. She's hurting. And because she's hurting, I want to hear about her needs. And then you put down those walls of defense. So being vulnerable versus defensive. Vulnerable means being open in your heart, in your emotions, to hear what the other person is saying, versus defending yourself and being deaf to what they're saying because you are so, tuned into attacking. So vulnerability versus defensiveness. So the underlying principle in this vulnerability and defensiveness is the understanding and the acceptance. If you must be married, if you must be in this relationship, you have to accept that occasional, unintentional hurt is part of a relationship. I think many people feel like, you've hurt me before, you will not hurt me again, and they close up their hearts and they become hard to their spouse and then become open to somebody else. If you keep towing that route, you know what will happen, infidelity. So, but if you accept that this person I married is a human being, makes mistakes, unintentional hurt is part of a relationship, then you are more open. You are more likely to choose to be vulnerable versus defensive. Learning to self-soothe. So this is what you can do to help when your emotions are aroused and you're angry, you're upset, you want to, lash out. So when that spouse that you married to meet your needs is not capable of meeting them, then you meet the needs yourself. You self-soothe. So I just want to emphasize, in the midst of an argument or in the midst of turmoil, it's self-soothing, not finding consolation or soothing in another person. Because if you tend to do this a lot, what will happen is that you will form a stronger emotional bond with somebody else than with your spouse. And this is the breeding room for infidelity. So until you are able to self-soothe, and what this is, it's just like a general guide. You can use your sense of smell, what calms you down, taste what things would put in your mouth and make you feel better. Touch, you can hug yourself, you can put a warm blanket around yourself, you can go into the bathtub, fill it up with warm water, listen to soothing music, listen to inspirational music, inspirational teachings. Do all these things. Learn to take care of yourself. Don't have your spouse as the only one, is only my everything. Take care of yourself. Know that you can actually do that. And bottom line is communicate. So talking about communication, there are a lot of problems with communication. So these 4 statements or words that I outlined or emphasized in blue, these are what are called the 4 horsemen. There's a famous American psychologist called Dr. John Gottman. He's known for decades of research into the things that predict divorce in relationships, and on the other side, the things that predict a strong relationship. So he outlined, after decades of research, that persisting in communicating this way is like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a matter of time before that relationship will hit the rocks. Number 1, defensiveness versus vulnerability, which I mentioned earlier. When you keep defending and never being vulnerable, close up your heart, you're all into attacking. It's a matter of time before that relationship crashes. Criticism, so you criticize. So the antidote to criticism is frame your criticism as a request. You don't help me in anything at home. You leave all domestic chores to me. What kind of a man are you? So if you were to frame it into a request, I would feel really helped if you could help me a little bit around the house a bit. So you notice I use the word I. We'll talk about effective communication later, how to actually, talk this, say this in such a way that the person doesn't feel attacked. So criticism is one of the 4 horsemen. Contempt. Contempt means looking at your partner from an angle of I'm superior, you're inferior. It's almost like disgust, but with this superiority added to it. So when you see these things creeping up in your relationship, God forbid, just know that the end is near. Stonewalling. Stonewalling means where you are no longer responsive. They are apologizing, it's okay. I'm really so sorry, it's fine. Your heart has been closed off. You are just, if you see the cartoon of the stone wall, he's just back is turned, doesn't care, he has lost hope. It's a matter of just there, he's just going through the motions. That's stonewalling. So these are, according to Dr. John Gottman, the 4 horsemen. So these are telltale signs. And unfortunately, I've actually confirmed this in practice. In relationships, when you're doing like a couples therapy, the essence of therapy is not for me to force them to stay together. It's for me to gauge their motivation, for me to gauge if there's any fire left, if they are willing to fight for it. If they are, then this is the way to go. If they are not, then accept that you're not and don't bother yourself. So when we're able to identify any of these, 1 or 2, then you know that you have work to do if you want to save that relationship. So effective communication, I'm rounding up now. Speaking, how do you talk about something that is sensitive, something that is a touchy subject? The example I gave about the untidy home, I said I. So use I statements. Start with I, because if you say you is like you're attacking someone. It makes people defend themselves, and there's no one you attack that will not defend themselves, even your husband or your wife. So if you want them to have their guard down, you want to say something sensitive, say it with an I. Say it, and that I is say how you feel, how that behavior makes you feel. When they see the emotion that is hurting, you are more likely to evoke empathy and sympathy rather than anger and fight. So if you come in late after a hard day's work, and your husband is angry, where have you been? Why are you not picking my calls? Is your work more important than I am? And then you want to say, you are so inconsiderate. You are so not understanding. You would say instead, it hurts me when you talk to me like that because I feel like you don't understand. I've had a hard day's work all day. And when you speak to me in that, you see what I've said. So I'm focusing more on how what you've done makes me feel rather than what you've done. So when you talk about your feelings, you disarm the person, and the person pulls down their tools and says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel like that. And you're on your way to recovery. Number 2, express the positives first. So I know that you're a caring wife, and I know you're hardworking, but I hurt and I get so worried when you come back late. Same scenario, but you've addressed it the way I've advised to, the way of effective communication. Rather than say, are you the only doctor in DIFF Medical Center? Are you the only one? Everybody else has their family, Exactly, something like that. Number 3, be specific. When I talked about cognitive distortions, I mentioned overgeneralization as an example. So rather than overgeneralize, pick out the thing that he or she does that is annoying and talk about it. If it's something, rather than phrase it as a criticism, phrase it as a request instead. So be specific. Avoid using always and never because they are guaranteed to derail your conversation. You never listen to me. No. Yesterday you were talking, I listened to you. The other day, and you're like, that's not the point. So avoid the always, avoid the never. Just say, specifically what you want to say. then focus on the perceived negative behavior and do not attack the person. So if you are a parent, you may know a bit of what I'm talking about, where a child does something wrong, but you're like, if you keep leaving your ball outside, and then, it's going to be deflated, it might be run over by a car, and then you will not have a ball, rather than, you stupid, forgetful boy, how many times have I told you, something like that. So the behavior, not the person. Likewise in our relationship, if there's a behavior you have a problem with, address it and keep the personality apart from it. So that's about speaking. How do you listen? Listen is not as easy as we think it is. So sometimes when people are listening, they are looking at their phones, they are looking at their wristwatches, they are looking at the time, they are looking elsewhere but at the person they're talking to. So when you do that, just that alone, what you have said to that person is that you're not as important as whatever I'm doing. So imagine if you come home from work and your wife is looking, sad, unlike herself, and you put your laptop down, you put what you're doing down, and you sit in front of her and look at her and say, what's up with you? What you've said is, you are more important to me than anything else, and you didn't even say a word. Versus, you come home, she's looking sad, you're like, sorry, I'll call you back. Honey, what's wrong with you? 1 minute. Why are you like this? Please get my food ready, I'm really hungry. And then she leaves feeling like, I'm one of the things he's interested in. I'm not number one. So there are little things that we can do in our relationships that will go a long way and communicate very powerful messages without you needing to make that much of an effort. So turn towards the person you're speaking to. Make eye contact. Rephrase. Now, these are things as medical people we can do for our patients as well. But because we're talking about relationships, I'll keep the examples to the relationship. So rephrase is just saying what the person said in your own words. So when the person tells you something, tells you the problem, and you just rephrase it, what you've said is, I get it, and the person feels, he gets me. And that's all you did was to say their words back. It's simple, but it's powerful. Empathize. Empathize is different from sympathize. So it's not like, oh, I'm so sorry. No. Empathize is when you identify the emotion of the person and you say it, and then you ask. So, sweetheart, you look sad. What's up? That's it. So when you do that, the person feels, your spouse feels like you are in tune with my body language. You know me, you care about me, and you haven't done that much of a, wasn't that much of a big deal. Validate. Validate means to express agreement with the part of the speaker's message that you agree with, something you agree with. For instance, talking back and forth, shouting, and then somebody starts crying, and you're like, and then the wife says, you always shout at me, you make me feel like I'm less than you, and I don't like it. So validating in that example would be like, I understand how you would feel that way because I'm shouting at you, I'm sorry. You may not agree with, the context, but it is true that, she's shouting because of what you said. Whether what you said was true is another matter altogether, but it made her feel sad, and for that, you are sorry. So you are sorry that the emotion was hurt, and you express that sorry. You don't need to agree with the context. So inquire is just, what's going on, ask, tell me. So this is a house. Again, this is Gothman's sound relationship house. This psychologist who has decades of research on relationships. And he said, he propagated and said that this is what a sound relationship looks like. You can see that the pillars are trust and commitment. And the first layer is a love map. A love map is just get to know your spouse. What's his favorite color? What's his favorite meal? What does he do at work? Basic information. Next is share fondness and admiration. The key word is share. Say it. You think she's such a great worker. You think she's hardworking. Say it to her. Don't compliment her outside. Of course, you can do that, but say it to her. Let her hear how fond you are of her. Let her or him hear how much you admire him or her. The third tier is turn towards instead of away. That means pay attention to the way she's looking to have her needs met. and meet it rather than turning away. So someone is feeling bad, and then she reaches out. I mean, a woman in a marriage is feeling bad, and then she reaches out and holds her husband's hand, and he puts it down and, rushes to pick up his phone. He didn't, he turned away from that. That reaching out is like, be here with me, I need you here. And that 1 second is like, that is more important than you. These are all subtle things we tell each other without saying anything. So the nonverbal is so much more powerful, actually, than the verbal. If you come to see a doctor, and the doctor is leaned back, legs crossed, looking at her wristwatch every 5 minutes, and she's telling you, I'm listening. In your mind, you're like, who referred me to see this doctor? The same thing in relationships. Your nonverbals go a long way, even more than your verbals. The positive perspective is what I talked about, how you can address your distortions, how you can address your negative way of thinking that's affecting your emotions. Managing conflict, I don't know if you can see what is written under. It says, accept your partner's influence. It's okay for your wife to be able to change your mind, and vice versa. There's some people that are so rigid and they feel like, I've made up my mind, and because I've made up my mind, whether you have a say or not, I am the man of the house or whatever, this is how it should be. So be flexible in that way, managing conflict. Make life's dreams come true. If you've ever heard of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a need that is self-actualization, when someone feels like they fulfill their purpose. And I see that with the CMD and the EDA. They are joining together, combining in unity to achieve their purpose, making their dreams come true. That is such a powerful way to unite your relationship, to make your wife's dream come true. What is it that she wants? What is it that is her dream? Be part of making that dream come true, and she would love you for it. That's like saying I love you in big, bold words without having to say it. Create shared meaning. They're the things that only the two of you do. That's the way you do it. That's your ritual. That's your routine. And I've come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
What a presentation. What a lecture. Dr. Anireto nailed it. Am I correct? She finished it. Thank you so very much. Yes, we will be taking questions in a moment. So please, if you would like to ask verbally, create the opportunity, or you can write it on a piece of paper and pass it through one of the ushers to us. I was just listening to her, and I felt like I was in a marriage enrichment seminar.
Something like that. After now, we expect some real nice, romantic. People should get more romantic. Understand the language better.
Of language.
Dr. Charles, we're in public. Don't do love. Language better. Get me? So, Dr. Chika, I was just wondering, listening to this presentation, I feel like there are lots of things we need to do, like heal from what we know in order for us to be better people. Because the example you gave, even starting from a child, I had that one too. Like when I will now come second, my father will ask me, so the person that came first now has like 10 heads. Why are you jumping? What happened to first? Why did you bring second home? So could that in any way create some sort of, like what you said, I didn't really think it was a big deal, but I realized that we do hold ourselves to extremely very high standards sometimes. And then we expect, but when it comes to talking to another person, you tell them, take it easy on yourself, it's not that hard. But then on your own self, so at what point do you really draw the line from, what would you call a healthy standard of yourself? Let me ask that.
That's a great question. So a healthy standard, I would say, is one that is flexible. I think that's just the key, flexibility. Realizing that you are a human being like everyone who makes mistakes. Not holding yourself to rigid standards. I should always be the best. The best is, if I'm not the best, then I'm not good enough. That is so rigid. So what I would say is be flexible. flexible in knowing that you make mistakes. A patient once asked me something similar to what you asked me, and we were working on her idea that she was not good enough. No matter what she did, she didn't believe she was good enough. She believed it in her head, but in her heart, nah. So she said to me, what is the ideal core belief to have? What should I be aiming towards? And I said, it's not like there's an ideal, it's rather the flexibility in it. Like this, I'm not good enough could be, I make mistakes like everybody else. So you see that it's just like a modification of the existing core belief, but with room for mistakes. I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay, your presentation made me realize very well that you can be physically here like this, and you have a mental world. And of course, you are still a spirit. You have a mental world. And when two people who are married come together, you have two spirits, two bodies, and two souls in a home. And I really found that example you gave about the spender wife and the saving husband. And you can see that trying to strike a balance is very, very important in a relationship. If you have, for instance, you have a spender husband and a spender wife.
They'll be hungry.
They'll be hungry. So it's a balance. It's very important. So, but my question now is, being that a man has a spirit, soul, and body, is there a spiritual role in achieving emotional wellness?
Absolutely. I think I even included it in one of my slides. Absolutely. Because we are not all body, we are not all emotion, we're will, and we're spirit as well. If you're a Christian, you will know that if you have a problem with your wife, your prayers will be hindered. So that's to tell you that unity in marriage is powerful, very powerful, both even in the spiritual realm. So I would agree wholeheartedly, both from the cognitive point of view, because for people who are spiritual, I do actually bring in the spiritual aspect, because I find it to really help to achieve the goals that the patient has. So I would agree wholeheartedly. But in people who are not spiritual, you know, there are some people who don't explore that aspect of who they are, then you wouldn't do that.
Okay. While we wait for the questions to keep rolling in, I want to ask, in an African culture where you have, I would like to speak on, for the men now, you know, growing up as a man, you are taught not to express emotions. This comes from little things, as even when he's a child, he's crying, you say, my friend, stop crying. Are you a woman?
Man.
Why are you crying like this now? Close, see your mouth, see the way you are just shouting. You're just crying. Don't cry. What happened? Say what you want to say. So we live in a world where, prior to the era of, you know, people understanding mental health, you have a lot of broken men, and they are not able to express their emotions. How do these men get to heal? Because you find them in, some people get so bad, they become extremely very stoic. They don't express anything, you know, and these men are now raising sons, and there's a lot of confusion in the world. So how do you do that? If you're coming from a background where you're told as a man you cannot express emotions, or emotions is a sign of weakness, how do you now heal from that and then raise children that should understand that as a man, it's okay for you to have emotions?
Thank you. You know, when you were saying that, you know, I had this picture of my patient, that's why I was nodding. So, absolutely. You know, when I gave the example of what emotional wellness is, accepting emotion, understanding it, this is the genesis of emotion is bad for a man, for example. So if you grow up always being told that when you're crying, don't show emotion, why, you're a man, then in your mind, you might have the idea that emotion is bad. And you stifle it, you press it, and unfortunately what happens is you can't choose the emotion to share and the emotion to, you know, to suppress. Everything else is suppressed. And unfortunately, you might think it's suppressed, but it comes out in other ways, in your behavior, easily angered, quick to temper, quick to hit, because you are not availing yourself, or you are not fully aware of your emotional self. So yes, I see that a lot. So when I'm trying to do an evaluation, for instance, and I'm trying to unearth core beliefs and intermediate beliefs, and rather than telling me emotions, the man is telling me what he will do as a result of the emotions, just because he doesn't even want to think about it. It's not something he wants to accept at all. So the way forward with that is to carefully, explain the reason why being emotional is helpful, the benefits, and step by step exposing these men or these people to emotions that they can bear and not, overwhelming them suddenly. So it's not easy, but if the person is willing and the person collaborates, then it's actually absolutely possible. So it also brings to mind some mental illness that can present that way, different from what you've said, Adeswa. There are people, for instance, who have post-traumatic stress disorder. And part of the way their body, their minds are dealing with this trauma they've been exposed to is to shut it out, get rid of it. So for instance, if a woman was raped or a man faced some catastrophic experience, part of the symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder is emotional numbing. They are not able now to attach or feel emotion, positive emotion, even to people they know in their head they love, but they cannot feel this loving feeling because the body, in an attempt, or the mind, in an attempt to protect them, has removed this experience and threw it away with all the emotions and all. So the treatment of that is exposure to this feared emotion with all the feared sensations and all the feared imaginations, and that is when the person gets cured. If not, the flashbacks that are typical of PTSD is the body trying to ruminate, trying to access, trying to integrate this experience into the consciousness. On one hand, this is unacceptable, we want to protect, throw it away. On the other hand, but to make headway, we need to accept. So this back and forth is what causes the flashbacks that they feel. Is what causes their feeling like hyper-vigilant. So that's just another, example of how someone can actually have emotions shut off, but as a result of a mental disorder, actually.
Okay, before we continue with the questions, while we pull them together, would like to take the remark from the Director of Clinical Services, Dr. Joshua Usman. Please, a round of applause for him.
Thank you, moderators. I was thinking you start with the Chief Medical Director before me. I should start before him? Oh, no, wala. Thank you. Chief Medical Director, sir, all other protocols duly observed. Dr. Anireto is a highly revered scholar, a physician par excellence, somebody who knows so much about emotional disorders, psychological disorders, and it's always a delight to listen to and hear her speak. I want to appreciate her for this wonderful lecture. I want to thank her for giving us this inaugural lecture in our 18th anniversary. The family, like you rightly said, is the bedrock of any society. That was in the plan of God from the beginning. When God created man and woman in his own image. And his intention is that man and woman should live together and cohabit together, no stress, no emotion until sin came into the world and certain challenges came in. This meeting, despite the fact that the inaugural lecture is a bit medical, it also has some spiritual connotation. I believe there's a room for the spiritual aspect of it. Thank you. I would like you to make some comments concerning the issue of spiritual aspect of this lecture. You talk so much about people having their own feelings, their perceptions, and in the home, you find out that one of the greatest challenge that creates problem in the family is the issue of assumptions, wrong assumptions. you aptly led to it. And I want us to be one of the take-home messages that we need to take home in this lecture. There's this in assumption also, we do wrong profiling. We begin to profile ourselves. Sometimes even parents profile their children. I can think of what this one of Master of Ceremony was talking about earlier on. When we compare our children as parents, we put them into a lot of stress and create problems for them. We should not profile our children for any reason. We must be able to be the ones that will create balance and ensure that there's balance within the home and we don't make wrong assumptions for our children. We must help men. Men sometimes are bottled up. Men don't talk. Women express their emotions more. And sometimes men need to be helped. I think we must look into that issue, and you must also help us to give some solutions to issues to do with men. Men are sick, they don't even come to the hospital. Men are carried to the hospital. And they want to bottle up their emotion because they are brought up in such a man. I don't cry, I don't feel sick, I shouldn't talk, and I shouldn't show my emotion. Traumatization is one of the issues that has to do with mental health. I'm sure being a specialist in that area and emotional well-being, you've dealt with so much issues to do with this. And I presently have patients in the ward. I want to discharge them, they don't want to go home. And the issue has to do with they're running away. So people want to hide away. They are fit, they are well, with all parameters and everything, but they are running away from their husbands. They are running away from their responsibility. They are running away from something. There is something in the environment that makes them want to run away. There are people who come to the home, to the hospital, and create symptoms where there is none. Talking about Murchison syndrome. I would like you to make a comment, but particularly on it, especially Murchison syndrome. I'm sure I should define it. People just create symptoms, go to the hospital, and try to bring symptoms that are not even there. There's even Murchison syndrome by proxy. She will carry her child and say this child has fever. Meanwhile, the child is playing and there's no even any sign of sickness in that child. I have talked a little bit about the health. The church, so I'll just leave the other one, but I would like to say that counseling in the church is key and is very important. And then finally on us as health workers, we go through a lot of emotion and stress, particularly those that are working in reproductive health when there's mortality and others. How do we really cope? We may take the aggression home, or we may bring aggression from the home to the hospital. How do we balance ourselves, even as health workers? Thank you.
A round of applause for our Deputy Director of Clinical Services. We'll take the remarks from the Chief Medical Director now. The CMD, sir.
So thank you for your very brilliant presentation. Not surprised? Thank you. Well done. Marriage or such relationships, it's not a product of societal evolution. It was designed by somebody, and the person wrote a manual on how it should operate. If you go out of that manual, you're on your own. So I listened to you very carefully. The entire 1 hour, 10 minutes I was writing. And what I was doing, each statement you make, I look for the appropriate part of scriptures and drop it there. Because the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. The only divinely appointed agency that can be used in this world to solve marital problems is in the gospel. So, but it's very hard really to see a very distinguished academician delve into this realm of spirituality and yet came out unscathed. Well done. That was a very smart move. A man cannot give what he doesn't have. So what I have, I give unto you. The Bible says we should be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's where it starts from. Because the mind is the battleground. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Because the mind is the seat of your emotion, the place you think and process things. And the body only carries out the actions that your mind has conceptualized. Therefore, if you want to change a man and what he does, change what he knows. Because the difference between men is all about the information that they have about God. Well, I'm a clinician, so I know the relationship between mental unwellness and physical disability. And in my field of infertility, growing up in a medical school, we taught that only 5% of infertility will be inexplicable. Now, it has increased to 13%. And it has increased to 13% simply because there are more discordant people, couple. People who enter into marriage for the wrong reasons. So when they enter, it's all about shattered dreams, wounded hearts, and broken hopes. The import of this, the mind, is it increases cortisol level. Your prolactin level must increase. And as adrenaline and the other catecholamines increase, there's a drop in your immune status. And we know that the ovaries begin to respond by a gradual increase in your follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, a drop in your estrogen, an increase in your blood pressure, secondary amenorrhea, and infertility has started. Now, when you add infertility to the quagmire that's already created, a vicious cycle continues. And you wonder, how do you stop this? Because with infertility, depending on the environment you come from, if you come from the land of my birth, where the absence of a child can spell the entire difference between the success and failure of your home, where infertility is laden with tears, shame, despair, and fear, it can lead to low self-esteem. And once there's a low self-esteem, anybody with a low self-esteem is going to devise a compensatory mechanism to fill the void, not knowing that the only thing that can fill that void is the gospel. And people now feed on dead things to attempt to fill the void. Then you see addiction. And unfortunately, the social media has thrown at us so many things we can get addicted to. So if you're not on the net, you're on your tablet. So we now see couples that two of them are at home, all they are doing is that they are surfing the net. And then the vicious cycle starts. Well, you've made a lot of prescriptions, and I'm grateful that our 18th year anniversary is a healing balm. Deal with toxic relationships. Thank you for creating the academic platform for us to thrive and discuss a very highly spiritual matter. Let me round it up this way. Scriptures makes me to understand that there is a hope for a tree. Now, but that tree only has hope at the scent of water. And the Bible calls the Word of God the living water. In order not to convert this discussion to a complete spiritual thing, I urge you to take home also, guest lecturer, that Luke chapter 17 verse 1 says, offense has come. How to deal with offense requires a very deep interplay of what the man who wrote the book of Proverbs, the wise man of all ages, that wisdom is profitable to direct, and a home is built by wisdom. Thank you, Deaconess Anireto.
The topic is achieving emotional wellness through cognitive behavioral therapy. This sermon will benefit from it in Family Clinic on the second Sunday of every month, DIFF Chapel. Please make sure you attend. Dr. Chika, our questions, they are numerous, and I'm sure you will do justice to them. When you were talking about selective abstraction, I also thought about it. Could there be an opposite? Because you were looking at concentrating on when you have a negative override. Now, this question is asking, how do you find a balance between the positives and negatives? Because would you blatantly ignore a heap of negatives and focus on one or few positives? Does that make a healthy relationship also? Because I don't want to do a negative override. Let's assume this relationship is fraught with a lot of negative attitude. So how do I ignore that and just focus on a few?
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm not advocating for us to ignore the negatives. The point of what I was talking about on how to deal with these cognitive distortions, that is negative automatic thoughts, negative ways of seeing things, is to make them more realistic, not to make them overly positive. So the focus is on being realistic. So there are times, maybe the person that asked the question is talking about when it's not a perception, when it's an actual fact. When it's not like a cognitive distortion, it's not your way of seeing it. Maybe in actual fact, there are more negative things in your relationship than positive. But before we even go to that line, a lot of times when relationships are in distress, the focus of the couple is mostly on their problems. And whatever you focus on gets magnified. So I would dare say that the person asking in real situations, it's not really that relationship is all negative. It's just that the focus of that couple for some time has been purely on their problems. Because if it was all negative, they wouldn't have gotten married in the first place. There must have been something. So the emphasis of therapy is for us to draw your attention from that, he did that, I did this, he did this, he did that, to, okay, there was a time he did that as well, which is discounted, and we didn't even count it. Is he not a husband? Is that not what husbands are supposed to do? It doesn't count the way you count the negative. So I just want to, I hope I'm answering the question. So in therapy, number one, we need to identify what is an assumption and what is a fact. Assumptions are what I make it out to be. The fact is, this is what it is. This is the pro, this is the con, advantages and disadvantages. But in distressed relationships, the focus a lot is on the negative. But I'm saying that this focus is unrealistic because there must have been something positive for you to have gotten married. I think the point in couples therapy is the couple willing to do what it takes to salvage their relationship? Are they motivated at all? So if there is motivation, then we will outline the problems. And having outlined the problems, you will marshal out solutions. And if they are motivated, it will work. But the problem is when a couple has given up before they come and they want you to work magic. If they don't have anything worth fighting for in their union, then you, as a human being, unless God, like CMD says, is only God. But in reality, we need to, draw a distinction between what is fact and what is an assumption. So, for instance, if a couple is maybe there's actually physical abuse, that is a fact. That is not an assumption, So if the man is interested and they're both equally invested in that relationship, then we will map out strategies, both cognitive and behavioral, to reduce the likelihood of that happening. And there's a couple like that. They're no longer in therapy, they're fine now. But the key there is their motivation. Are these people willing to work on it? Not too long ago, I saw a couple, they called in, But I knew they weren't ready to fight for their relationship. And I told them, this therapy is not for me to force you to be married. You need to decide that you want to be married. If you're not ready to do the work, there's nothing I will say that will change your mind. You need to be ready. You need to be ready to fight for this relationship. Then my job is to show you how it's going to work. I hope that answers the question. So definitely,
Thank
yes,
you.
there are times when the negative things happen, and they are facts, they're not assumptions, and they're threatening to submerge the entire relationship. But if the couple has the spark, if there is still some fire, and we assess that fire when I ask them, how did you meet? What is it you like? And I watch their reactions. For those that will remain together, you see them smile, you see them look at themselves somehow, and you're like, oh, this will work. But for those where it's really low, you can sense it, that they're not ready, they've given up. So if they've given up, then they shouldn't be in the therapy at all. We should be thinking about maybe the church, somewhere else. So that's just what I want to draw out. The therapy is not magic, it's not magic. The couple needs to be ready to do the work. They need to be ready to do the work.
All right, thank you, Dr. Anireto. The second question is, what's wrong with being very protective of your emotions since you have been hurt over and over again?
Thank you. So what's wrong with that is that if you keep protecting yourself, you're shutting everyone out, and you're not going to have a very fulfilling relationship. There are some people, when they're hurt, nobody can get in, not even their wife. They shut everyone out, but the problem with shutting out is that no new life comes in as well. So the problem with being overly defensive and overly closed is that the healing is difficult. So this example I give to my patients, when I'm trying to, bring out the emotions that have been hurt, and I'm sensing resistance, and I tell them, you are here because you want to be helped, right? And they say yes. And I'm like, it's like a child who has an injury and hides it from mommy because mommy will open it and wash it, and it hurts. But that hurt is part of the healing. So the vulnerability is let go, open up, say it. And that is how the healing comes. That is how your spouse understands you. Yes, there is a chance that she will use it against you. That is true. But there is a chance that you have an intimacy like no other. And that you will forge a union that is, above divorce. So that's marriage. It's a balance. But for those who have gotten the balance right, the key to intimacy, because what is intimacy after all? What is the intimacy? It is you know me, and you accept me, and you love me. But if I don't let you know me, then how will you even understand my problems? How will you be able to help me? So it's instinctive for people because we are all geared towards self-protection. And self-protection says, don't let them know, don't say, hide it, keep it. But if you don't say, you hide and you keep, the healing will not come. The person will not understand you, and you will not be open. So that's what I use. So I use the goal as a motivation to draw them out. I say, do you want that? Yes. Do you want this dream? When you got married, you had a vision in your eyes, in your mind's eye. That's what you want, right? They say, yes, this is the road you have to take. So it's something I do little by little. I don't just suddenly expose them. It's a gradual process. But inevitably, they come to realize that intimacy they long for, it's the road to getting there is vulnerability.
How do you convince, and this is a very interesting question, how do you convince a narcissist that they are one, and how do you get them to change? Who does the evaluation that makes you come out with the diagnosis that this person is a narcissist? And then how do you get them to change?
Excellent question. So when I was explaining what a personality disorder is, it's actually one of the very difficult disorders to treat. And the reason is this. If someone has a generalized anxiety, PTSD, complicated grief, depression, these are all things that are happening to the personality. So it's easy for the person to remember when I was happy, when I didn't have flashbacks or emotional numbing, when I didn't have anxiety once upon a time. But for people that have a personality disorder, the personality itself is organized in such a way that their coping strategies are not helpful anymore. Let me give you an example. Paranoid personality disorder. A patient of mine was once grew up with a mother that was bipolar. So all her life, she had to watch her back. 1 minute she's hugging, the next minute she's giving them a backhand. So look over your shoulder, you need to protect yourself. The place is not safe. So she grew up with this people are out to harm me attitude. So in her growing up years, this was a way that coped, it worked. Just the way for the narcissist, that attitude was working, and that is why it was strengthened over years of doing that thing, because that was what gained approval for them. That's what got approval. But everyone is not like that, and everyone is not out to get you for the paranoid person, and everyone is not looking to give you approval or looking for approval to equate to your self-esteem, for instance. Oh, and in that case, it is negative. In the real world, it's no longer helpful. So in answer to the question is, how do you tell someone they're a narcissist? A lot of times, because it's their personality, they don't see the problem with themselves. Everybody else has a problem except them. So what brings them into therapy a lot of times is not that I have narcissistic personality, so I need help. It is that my relationships, there's a problem. I can't seem to have a good relationship. At work, at home, through my life, I've never had a good, so it is through the solving of their problems that it's now the pathway through which I use to explain to them that this thing you are doing, this way you are, is not your fault, but it's causing a lot of problems. So if you want to have satisfactory relationships, this way of thinking is not helpful in this time. It once was helpful, that is why it's so strong in you now, but right now it's not helpful. So when I use this, it helps them to be able to see it and say, oh, okay, it's not possible that I would have everybody in my life I've argued with is all their fault. They cannot all be wrong and I'm right. And this, using that, helps them to begin to see that perhaps the problem is actually from me. But even then, to be honest with you, what we are able to achieve is not a change in personality. What we're able to achieve is to teach that person how to cope with their relationships. So the basic narcissistic tendency is still there. But we teach them how to have helpful relationships and how to tame it and subdue it so that they're able to engage adaptively with other people.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. This says, can a person be single and be happy without any emotional disorder?
Emotional
disorder.
Can a person be single and happy?
Wellness.
Absolutely. You know, when I started talking about the emotional wellness, the first thing was about taking care of yourself. So marriage doesn't equate to happiness. No. Happiness is about your sense of, are you achieving meaning in your life? Is your life worth something? Are you doing what you feel you're in this world to do? Are you satisfied with what you're doing? Do you accept how you feel? So if marriage is helpful in achieving that, wonderful. If marriage didn't help you, maybe you're out of a relationship, wonderful. In fact, people who think that I need to be married to be happy, or if I'm not married, I'm not happy, you're gradually even veering towards the codependency that we spoke about. You need to be whole as a person, and then when you meet a whole person, you make a whole marriage. So you can't be half and then hope the marriage will solve your problem. It doesn't work that way.
I noticed that self-deprecation is my default setting. When I fall short, and it feels like a luxury to take the time needed to assess my emotions. What tips do you have for someone like me who is very busy, but I'm struggling mentally?
Wow, I love the kind of questions I'm getting because it tells me that people really listen to what I said. So if you're too busy to attend to your own emotion, then you're playing too busy. You know, the first steps I gave was take time to be with yourself and to be able to know what makes you tick and what makes you happy and what makes you who you are. So if you have the tendency to look down on yourself, you have the tendency to talk down on yourself, one tip I usually tell my patients is, you know, there's a voice in all of us. It's either praising you or it's running you down. The one that is stronger tells you who you are, where you fall on that spectrum. So if your voice of criticism is strong, anything, I said it, stupid girl, you've done it. Nobody says, well, me and you, I know you're stupid. You know, so what I say is give yourself credit. Give yourself credit. You did this. Tell yourself it is good. Well done. Well done, me. You know, You stayed awake all night, you went to work and you saw your patients. Tell yourself unconscious, well done, I did that well. Not only say it to yourself, give yourself a reward. It mustn't be something you buy for yourself. Do something for yourself. So when you do this, you gradually dampen the voice of the critic in you, and you increase the voice of, the fan. And this is one way to gradually increase your sense of self. Another thing is play to your strengths, realize your weaknesses, and strengthen your weaknesses. It depends on what your self-esteem is carved around. What is the core of your self-esteem? As we grow up, we find that there are different things are at the root of our sense of self. A lot of times for some people, it's their academics. I'm an excellent, I'm intelligent person. And so when they don't do well academically, they don't know who they are anymore. I'm a failure. If I don't get perfect A's, then I'm not good enough. So where I'm going to is, when you find out that this is what I'm good at, keep doing it. And what I'm not good at, explore. So in that way, you diversify the things that boost your sense of self. So what I'm saying is, play to your strengths, strengthen your weaknesses. That is another way to strengthen, your sense of self. Another way is to surround yourself with people who are rooting for you. When you're all around people who are calling out your deficiencies, she gave the lecture well, but she didn't bring out spirituality. She did well, but she stood in a way that didn't help us appreciate. So when you stay around those people, your attempts will be dampened by them. You need to stay around people and what I mean stay around means, the people who you call your true friends. Let them be people that are really in your corner, who are there to encourage you. So doing that, you find out that with time, your self-esteem increases.
Yeah, so would you, because most times when you attend lectures, you don't really want things to just be wrapped up in so many things. So if we have to take steps, and we're talking about emotional wellness, and someone is saying, I don't have time to access my emotions. So typically, spouses have to ask each other, when last did you take time off for yourself? It should be something that should be encouraged. Because if the person that you're doing life with encourages you to take time out for yourself and does everything to make sure that you're stable in that point and what they can do to help, then that's a good step to a marriage, isn't it? To a good marriage.
Actually, what I'm talking about is take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, but this is someone talking about her being busy and not mentally, she's busy, but she's not mentally stable. If you're trying to make a marriage work and this person is married, it's funny how the spouse hasn't understood that this person is busy but not mentally stable.
You know my answer to this?
Yes.
I'm going to give you a scenario.
Okay.
I had a patient a long time ago who, sickle cell, he didn't have time to take his drugs. So I'm going to apply the answer to what you've asked me.
I get it.
He didn't have time to take his drugs, was just too busy, and then he kept having crises. That was now affecting the job. So I was trying to say, take out time, and he was like, you don't understand, doctor, I'm busy, I'm a high-level executive. This is what pays the bills, this is what takes care of my family. I know what I told him. I told him, what is important to you? Write it out for me. He said, my wife. I said, number one. Number two, he said, my family, my kid, God, money, and we listed out his values. So I'm answering the question for the person asking this question. What do you care about? Write it out. And then I told him, draw a circle. Imagine this circle is your 24 hours. Tell me, what are you doing now? And we found out that our circle, about 60% of the circle was work. And then I said, what else? This family, this wife you love, how much time do you actually spend with her? And it was like 5%. And I said, now look at this. This is what you want in life, right? He said, yes. But this is what you're doing. He said, yes. How likely, given what you are doing, do you think you will achieve these values? Then he was quiet. And he said, So in answer to that question, what do you care about? You questioner. Write it out. What matters in your life? Write it out. How much time do you spend doing what you like to do? Or attending to these things that matter? If there is a discrepancy, then perhaps you need to look at your schedule, your balance again.
So ultimately, you are responsible for your own emotional wellness.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
All right, this question goes, how does a person who is emotionally unwell because they find it difficult to speak on how they feel, speak to people that are not showing interest. That's because they don't want to burden the listener. Isn't it better to just keep it into yourself to avoid being hurt?
So is this in the context of wanting to be in a relationship with someone? When you say speaking to
it could be in the
people?
concept of already being in a relationship, being the ability to express yourself and feel like you're being heard.
Okay.
If this person is speaking to, she feels like speaking to, or he feels like speaking to a significant other, and this person is not listening. So over time, is it not just better I just keep it to myself instead of, since this person is not listening? So you're having a listening problem.
Okay. So it's a great question, and actually that's like a typical scenario in distressed relationships. So my answer to that is, if you are sure the person who has something to say, that it's solely your partner's attitude that is making you reticent and not feeling like expressing yourself, and not something else about yourself. So the question now is, why are you so afraid to say how you feel? Is it because you're afraid of your partner's disapproval, or you feel somehow that your opinions don't count as much as the other person's opinion? So if the reason for your being the way you are is in your partner, perhaps expressing this thing that is making you feel unable to express your emotions to your partner will help him or her be able to understand the effect on you. But if it is something that has to do with you yourself, not feeling like your opinion is valid enough to be expressed, or that it doesn't matter, then you need to do, those questions I listed out. What is the reason why? What is evidence in favor? What is the evidence against? So it all boils down to what is it that is really making you. Because what I find by experience is that it's not necessarily their spouse. It's them. Because someone who is comfortable or confident in themselves, and you're not listening to me, and I love you, you love me, I married you, today is today, you will hear me out, and you will say your piece. But I suspect that there's something else that is kind of, maybe she has said something before and has been hurt, or the opinion was trampled upon, and here is the fear of being hurt again. Now, if that is the case, and the person who hurt you is the person you're presently married to, then if you're expressing that to the person doesn't help, then maybe you need to do therapy. But if it is that somebody in the past hurt you, and you are punishing the person in the present because of what happened in the past, then you yourself need to come to terms with that. I hope that answer is helpful.
Yeah, we live in a generation where we hear people say men are scum. And this translates to toxic relationships or worse situationships. Number one, how do such people heal from that ideology? Number two, can you heal while you're in a relationship? Number three, is it better to heal when you are single before you find yourself in a relationship?
Yes, I can answer that one. Heal first when you're single before you get married. So the answer to this, this what we're saying is really it's so apt, because these things are everywhere. When you said that men are scum, there's a patient of mine, her own is men are monsters. And she believes that how much? 90% men are monsters. Because she went through, abuse from growing up in her marriage. She's out and she's a survivor. But her motto is men are monsters. We're working on it now. So how do these people heal? It will take time, to be honest. But if they want to heal, it will take working with your therapist. So the advantage I have is that I am privileged to walk with these people through their pain, and through their difficulties. But the good thing is that they do get better. It's not easy, they do. But it's a thing of where they need to learn that their experiences and what they've been through, the conclusions they've come to as a result of their experiences, they need to decide that these experiences will not narrate their future. They need to decide that I've been through this and this happened to me. I can decide, though maybe then I didn't have the power to choose, but now I can decide that my future will not be like this. And that is where the power, they need to take control. Because if someone hurt you in the past and did unspeakable things to you, You can give them power over your future by still holding on to those conclusions that will help you then. But this situation is different, especially if these people now find themselves, because the patient I have in mind is actually in a good relationship now, and the man loves her, but she can't let go of these men are monsters because of what she's been through. So the thing is, are you going to allow what you went through to, narrate your future? Or are you going to take control and say, well, that man was actually a monster, and I agree, he was a monster, but this man is not, and I will not allow what happened to dictate my future. So there are techniques that we go through, and it's not an overnight thing, but definitely people like this after some time. So again, the way to build motivation, what I do is always, what is your goal? What do you want? What do you care about? You want this? Yes, this is how we're going to do it. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, they fight it. There has to be another way, doctor. I'm like, unfortunately, this is the path. But when they are motivated enough because they want a relationship that is good, they want a relationship like some other people, then they have to learn, to go through the steps in the course of therapy.
This question says, how do you handle issues of complex?
Of what?
Complex in a relationship tending to violence?
Wow. So this is so true, so sad, but so real, so true. Unfortunately, people who are involved in violent relationships end up not having a sense of self at all. Their sense of self is so damaged. The patient I have in mind, she's very forgetful. And why she's forgetful is not because she has something wrong with her intellect, but because she's been through so much abuse that she's anxious and afraid of everything. And when you are anxious and afraid and you are in your mind rather than in the present, you are forgetful because the present is passing you by. So the question was, how do I deal with the complex? Okay, the first thing is to get the person out of the abusive relationship. If the man is willing to change, if they are both willing to salvage the relationship, then yes, there's work to do, but it can be salvaged. But unfortunately, what I see sometimes is the woman is into it and the man is like, I don't have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about. So what to do, first of all, is to get the person out of the abusive relationship. Then those steps I talked about of how to build self-esteem. Then that is what I would say again. But again, in addition to that, is to address these anxieties that the person has. So a lot of times, the person who has been abused is left with thoughts and ideas which they take as facts, like, I'm not good enough. My patient said to me, I'm trash. That's her assessment of herself. I'm trash. I'm not worth anything. So we're asking her, why do you think you're trash? Meanwhile, she has written a book. She's an author. She authored a book in the middle of this horrible marriage. She's a mother to 2 lovely boys. She's financially independent. She owns her own house. And her conclusion is, I'm trash. So again, what the method I'm using for you is what I outlined for you. What is the reason do you think like that? Is there anything that you've accomplished in your life? And we keep listing them and listing them and listing them. And then at the end of the day, you hope, and they do most of the time, realize that this sense of I'm trash is you're buying into the concept or the idea that your spouse imposed on you by making you feel like you are inferior and he can do no wrong. Then when you look at him, the abusive spouse, the perpetrator, and then you are seeing he's perfect, right? Yes, he says he's perfect, can't make any mistake, right? Right. Do perfect people beat other people? Do perfect people not pay the school fees of their sons? Do perfect people, and you're looking, and then you realize that this thing he's been doing to you over the years, I'm talking about this patient, is more a reflection of himself than you. So it doesn't mean that you're trash. He made you feel that way, the way he treated you. In actual sense, he has a very high but fragile self-esteem that is so dependent on what other people do that he needs to bring someone down to make himself feel good. Is that person a perfect person? So this is how I would approach this kind of thing. And when you lay it out on the table, I'm like, so if your friend, because that double standard always comes into play. So I say, if your friend or your son gets married tomorrow and tells you this and says, Mommy, I'm trash, and you're like, really, why? And you list out all evidence in favor, evidence against. but this person is perfect, right? What will you tell your son at the end of the day? And usually they're able to see that that idea of I'm trash is not realistic. It's the opinion that they took from somebody else who made them feel that way to make themselves feel good. So that's the approach I would use.
Okay, this is a final question. When looking at the four horsemen, the last was stonewalling. Now, when you get to a point where someone is looking, you go like, yeah, whatever. Just, it's okay. Do whatever you want to do. So this person is completely detached. How do you deal with a what's the solution for stonewalling behavior? Because more often than not, that's what precedes irreconcilable differences, divorce. So the woman now, or the man looks at you, anything you're saying, he'll say, it's okay. Okay. Yeah, so at that point, what would be the solution when you get to the point of stonewalling?
Thank you. So when someone gets to that point, that's usually the point where they're now looking to see a therapist. And maybe the person still invested in relationship is now fighting for the relationship. So what is done at that time is I ask them, okay, so what did you love about this person? I say, tell me your story. How did you meet? And you watch their reactions. You watch whether there's a spark left, whether there is a smile or a fond remembering, or there's a look in their eyes, remembering the good old days. So their reaction when telling the story, the reason they got married in the first place, the emotional needs that they wanted met by being in that marriage, if they still have any goal that they feel can be achieved by that marriage, if there's still anything that they feel this marriage can help achieve, then that is what I salvage as the goal for that therapy session, and that is the goal to what would be the motive to salvage that relationship. But it has to be on, from the two sides. So if the wife is saying, we have children, so in essence, what I'm saying is we do cost-benefit analysis. What is the benefit of getting things better, changing from this situation to a better marriage? Our children will model a good, how to live together for our children. Children will have parents that are together. Our business, we know we have joint assets. Our, he knows me better than anybody else. The devil you know is better than the one you don't know. And then we list out all this. What is the benefit of being out? Oh, I would not have to fight for this anymore. We do all that. Stay the way you are. Get out of the relationship, make things better. And at the end of the day, you weigh the options. Which one will help you achieve those goals we identified easier? And when we do all this, if the couple sees that staying together is worth it, then we say, okay, now we're both on the same, plate, on the same page. We both want this, and this is what we're going to have to do. Increase rewards, reduce punishment, accept responsibility, reduce blame. But if you all agree and we'll weigh the pros and the cons, and it's like, it's easier or it's more advantageous for us to leave, then the therapy has ended. So it all depends on what they judge to be helpful for them.
Man is a spirit being. He has a mental state, and then you have the spiritual. He's being governed by the spiritual. So at every point in time, all three really have to be in optimum health for us to be completely balanced.
Absolutely.
So when you go to church, you're fed spiritually. You take care of yourself physically, diet, exercise, do all the things you need to do. But this is one aspect of our lives which is, we tend to neglect a lot. So today, we're talking about emotional wellness. We need to take care of our mental well-being to create the balance that we need to become optimal, to operate optimally as human beings. Dr. Chika, you killed it. We want to say thank you. We appreciate you, and we're very proud of you. A round of applause for her, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chika. Just to add, this is very important to avoid domestic violence in homes. If you think you need to talk to someone, she's readily available. The role of communication is key. you can come in for counseling and you get help. In order for us to achieve a little emotional wellness, let's make welcome Ebony Waves as they help us with this song, We Should Be Together.